Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. I hope you're all well. I am kickstarting 2025 by sharing with you a link to a podcast that I recorded recently over the Christmas break. And it ended up being a really fantastic in-depth conversation. And I thought I'll share the link with you because it will answer many of the questions that you have asked me on my channel about some in-depth discussions around Muslim identity, the hijab, and the place of a female Muslim believer and the worth of a female Muslim believer. But just a little bit about the podcast itself and how it came about. So one of the joys of internet is that you get to connect with wonderful like-minded people all across the world. And I have recently connected with Effath, Yasmin. And I want to say a little bit about her because she's such a wonderful and inspiring person. She lives in India and she is a leading biodynamic craniosacral therapist, and she's an award-winning international board-certified lactation consultant. And she's known for her unique insights on maternal wellness, parenting, and women's autonomy. So Effath, in fact, works with very vulnerable women, and she is an expert in women's reproductive health. So she gives them advice, support, therapy throughout their reproductive cycle, prior to pregnancy, during pregnancy, postpartum, during lactation. And through her experience of working with these women, she, of course, has this absolutely wonderful insight into the issues that women face, the really challenging issues that women face more broadly, and then Muslim women face, specifically the Muslim women community, and some of the challenges they have. And she and I have been talking to each other for a period of time, and we wanted to record a podcast where we teased out some of those issues. And she's such a brilliant conversationist. Her questions were so in-depth. And when I was listening back to the podcast, which is 2 hours long, I realized just how much we had covered in those 2 hours. And that's the reason why I wanted to share that with you, because I think it will help answer many of the questions that you have raised with me on my channel as you've left your wonderful comments and questions. So the podcast is titled Reclaiming Identity and Modesty in Islam, and it's been issued on Effath's channel, Nourish and Nurture. What I will do is add a link to the podcast after I finish this brief introduction to it. I want to go through the topics that we covered because I think that would really pique your interest, and also I think you would be able to get some really in-depth answers to some of the questions. So we started off by talking about the fact that the Quran gives so many rights to Muslim women, but we don't see them on the ground. And when we ask religious scholars these questions, they brush our concerns aside. And they often talk about ideals and say things like, but Islam has given so many rights to women. But they're never able to answer the question of, but why is that not translating into our lived experience, our day-to-day reality? So there is a disconnect. So we started talking about that. And during the podcast, I also shared my journey as to what brought me to all of this learning about Islam and all of the research I do in this area. And listening back, I realized just what a raw and candid conversation it was. When you listen to it, I think you'd be able to pick up the emotion in my voice as well. Usually I'm very calm, but I think there were moments when I was really my frustration and pain with some of the issues that Muslim women face. I think that was bubbling to the surface. So we started off talking about the rights that Allah has given us and the fact that they don't translate into our lived reality. I'm reading from my notes. We also talked about what is God's vision for me as a Muslim woman, what is my worth and value as a believer. We talked about how authoritarian discourses about women blackmail us by playing on our faith. So if we want to think big, if we're ambitious, that is presented as somehow creating a conflict with our faith, and then we're blackmailed on our faith, and we're told that if you are a good believer, you will abandon your dreams and your ideas. So we go into that in quite a lot of detail. We also talked about how it is Muslim male scholars who tell us how to live as believing Muslim women. We talked about reducing Islam's justice-oriented revelation to trivial do's and don'ts. I'm sure you've picked up by now that this is a theme that comes up often in my conversations. We talked about the evolving context of a living, breathing Muslim community and how our religious scholars and their opinions do not keep pace with that. We talked about our right as Muslim women to express ourselves as individuals and to be who we are, our authentic selves. We also talked about how one empowered woman can impact so many women. Just one empowered woman and the change that she can bring is phenomenal. We talked about the sources of Islamic knowledge, and I spent in that podcast quite a lot of time teasing out that conflation of Islam with hadith, particularly on women's issues. I also explain the difference between the Quran, Sunnah and hadith as sources of knowledge. And specifically, I go into some detail about the process of canonization of hadith, which means in effect that some hadith books are considered more authentic than others. How did that process come about? You will find very interesting in that podcast some of the correctives that I share, that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who was the wife of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how she corrected some male companions and corrected their opinions. And I share an anecdote where Aisha's reaction to her anger, her reaction to a misogynistic hadith is also recorded. I think you'll find that fascinating, and you'll also find that really empowering. Effath and I also talked about the fact that us Muslim women are constantly dismissed and invalidated. Our experiences of Islam are invalidated, the way we're experiencing this version of Islam. We talked about hijab's historical interpretation and how the insistence on hijab now demands conformance from women. We talked about the Arabization of Islam. We talked about how colonialists dismantled vibrant and strong matriarchal cultures in India. We talked about the battle over women's hair and reducing women's piety to the headscarf and obedience to husbands. We talked about how the hijab, which should ideally be a woman's own choice and her connection with God and expression of her own piety, is actually co-opted by patriarchy, and it is used to then divide women among modest and immodest. We talked about how conformance to dress is taking away some opportunities from women. And we delved a lot into how faith is used to convince women to diminish their goals. That this conditioning is done, and we're told to think small and not dream big. We reflected on that quite a lot, because it's almost like we diminish ourselves sometimes when we have those big goals and aspirations. We actually diminish ourselves, and often the argument we use is from religion, that I'm doing this because I'm trying to please God. So how is faith used to diminish our possibilities, our potentialities and our ambitions? We talked about the role women can play if they move from being passive recipients of knowledge to creators of knowledge. And finally, we talked about how Muslim women can reclaim their voice. And often that Muslim women don't realize how much power they have and how they can tap into that power and become those active creators of knowledge and shape their own destinies. So it was a lovely, lovely conversation. I felt that Effath's questions managed to tease out and unpack so much, which I've just shared with you. So please do take out some time to listen to that podcast. And do let me know what you think about it. I will share it in my community channel, in my community section on my YouTube channel. So please do interact with that and let me know what you think. Any questions that pop into your mind, as ever, any disagreements, please do share with them. 2025 is for me a very exciting year. I've had proper rest over the Christmas break. I am brimming with ideas, and inshallah I will be sharing a lot of my thinking and my research with you as we share this journey together to increase our knowledge of our wonderful religion and to achieve our ambitions and goals and become really productive and influential people in the Muslim Ummah, and inshallah grapple with challenges that the world is currently throwing towards us. Look after yourselves, and inshallah I will be sharing some more material with you soon. Take care of yourselves. Assalamu alaikum.